In the windswept plains of Andalusia in Spain, there lived a shepherd boy named Santiago. Don't just picture him as an ordinary shepherd who didn't know the world. On the contrary, Santiago was an educated young man who had attended a seminary. His parents wanted him to become a priest, a respectable figure who would bring pride to the family. But Santiago's heart whispered something else. His heart didn't long for the sturdy walls of a church, but for the endless horizon. He didn't want to read about the world from thick books. He wanted to read it directly from the wind, the rivers, and the faces of people in different cities. So with the courage of a traveler, he chose a simple path that gave him freedom, becoming a shepherd. His sheep were his ticket to exploring valleys and cities, and his backpack always held two things: a jacket for the cold nights and a book to fill the silence. However, amidst the peace of his life, a seed of restlessness began to grow. A dream, the same dream, came to him repeatedly every time he slept under the roof of a ruined old church where a giant sycamore tree grew through its missing ceiling. In his dream, a small child took him to the Egyptian desert. There, the child pointed toward the magnificent pyramids and said, "If you come here, you will find a hidden treasure." But right when he was about to be shown the exact location, Santiago always woke up. This dream felt like more than just a dream. It was an echo of the soul's desire, a calling drawing him toward a destiny he didn't yet understand. This calling is what led him to meet a mysterious old king named Melchizedek in the town square of Tarifa. The king, with a gaze that seemed to know everything in Santiago's heart, spoke of a concept that would change the shepherd's life forever. That concept was called a personal legend. A personal legend, the king said, is what you have always wanted to achieve. Everyone, when they are young, knows what their personal legend is. It is our purest life goal, a soul mission written by the hand of the universe even before we were born. However, as time goes by, a mysterious force, fear, doubt, the opinions of others, begins to convince us that it's impossible to make it happen. Santiago was stunned. The king's words pierced right through the doubts he had been harboring. And right there, a grand promise was whispered to him, a primary law of the universe. When you truly want something, the entire universe will conspire to help you achieve it. This promise was a light, but its beam shone on the first and most terrifying test. To answer the call of the pyramids, to begin the journey toward his personal legend, Santiago had to do something unthinkable. He had to sell his sheep. Those sheep weren't just livestock, they were his entire world. They were his security, his source of livelihood, his comfort zone. Selling them meant trading everything real and everything he owned right now for a dream that might be nothing more than a mirage. Here, the first lesson of the Alchemist is revealed vividly: the courage to leave your comfort zone. True destiny will never be found within the fences we build to protect ourselves. It waits out there, on the unknown path, in the risks we are willing to take. And Santiago, with a heart racing between fear and hope, made his choice. He sold his woolly friends, and with a pocket now full of coins, he bought a ticket for one destination: Africa. The journey toward his treasure, and toward himself, had begun. With the fire of his personal legend burning, and a pocket full of gold coins from selling his sheep, Santiago crossed the strait and landed in Tangier, Morocco. The smell of exotic spices, the deafening noise of the market, and a language he didn't understand greeted him. This was a new world, the gateway to his treasure. Fear mixed with the excitement of a true adventurer. He sat in a bar, trusting the friendliness of a young man who spoke his language, Spanish. The young man promised to help him buy camels to cross the Sahara Desert. Santiago, still naive, handed over all his money, all the gold coins that were the bridge between his past and his dream. He handed them over just like that. He waited, but the young man never came back. At that moment, Santiago's world collapsed in an instant. In the middle of a crowded market that didn't care, he realized the brutal truth. He had been robbed. He was alone without a single cent, without the ability to speak the language, without anyone he knew on a foreign continent. He cried. Not the cry of a shepherd, but the cry of despair of a human being seeing his dream shattered into pieces before it even started. The universe that was supposed to conspire to help him now felt like it was laughing at him. At this point, many people would give up. Many would consider their dream a curse and crawl back home in shame. Santiago also thought about going back, about forgetting all that nonsense about a personal legend. But as he picked up the two stones King Melchizedek had given him, Urim and Thummim, he remembered the king's words. He decided not to see himself as a poor victim, but as an adventurer facing an obstacle. This was the first filter of destiny. With an empty stomach and a heart that was still hurting, he walked aimlessly until he found a shop on top of a hill selling crystal glassware. The shop was quiet, dusty, and looked pathetic. The owner was an old man living in a passionless routine. Santiago offered to clean the crystals in exchange for food. As he meticulously cleaned each glass, something magical happened. The crystals, now sparkling again, caught the attention of passers-by. 2 customers came in and bought something. The shop owner was shocked. That day, he hired Santiago. For nearly a year, Santiago worked at that crystal shop. This was his turning point. He didn't just work, he learned. He learned Arabic. He learned the art of trade. And most importantly, he learned a universal language that doesn't require words. The language of enthusiasm and hard work. He provided new ideas, built display racks outside the shop, and sold tea in beautiful crystal glasses. The shop that was once dying became a popular destination. There, Santiago found a reflection of himself in the crystal merchant. The old man also had a personal legend, going on a pilgrimage to Mecca. That dream was the only thing keeping him alive, yet he was too afraid to make it happen. He was too afraid that if his dream came true, he would have no more reason to live. He chose the comfort of dreaming about Mecca over the risk of actually going there. This contrast made Santiago realize something. He didn't want to be like the crystal merchant, living in a prison built of his own fears. The second lesson of the alchemist soaked into his bones. Failure is a teacher, not an executioner. You are never a victim of your circumstances. Every cent he saved from the crystal shop was no longer just money. It was proof of his resilience. It was a symbol that he could turn bad luck into an opportunity. He didn't curse the thief in his heart. Instead, he was grateful because that misfortune had taught him to get back up, to understand the value of hard work, and to read the omens that led him to the crystal shop. With enough money now to buy 120 sheep and a ticket back to Spain, Santiago stood at a crossroads. He could go back to his old life, richer and wiser, but the fire of his personal legend, which had almost gone out, was now reignited by the desert wind calling his name. He knew this wasn't the end. It was only the true beginning. He didn't buy sheep, he bought a camel. Santiago was now in the middle of a vast sea of sand. He joined a large caravan moving slowly toward Egypt, a tiny world crawling across the eternity of the desert. The desert isn't just empty land to be crossed. The desert is a harsh and wise teacher. It teaches the language of silence. Amidst hundreds of people and animals, there is an unspoken discipline. During the day, when the sun burns mercilessly, total silence envelops them. Everyone focuses on the journey, on every step of the camel, on the horizon that never changes. At night, when the campfires are lit and thousands of stars spread across the sky like jewels, only then are stories shared. Santiago learned from a wise camel driver. The man taught him the most important lesson in the desert. Focus on the present. I don't live in my past or my future, the man said. I'm only interested in the present. If you can always concentrate on the present, you will be a happy man. In the desert, worrying about tomorrow or regretting yesterday is a luxury that can kill you. You have to live here now. In that caravan, Santiago also met an Englishman. This man was his opposite. He didn't care about the desert, the stars, or the silence. His entire world was confined within stacks of thick, complicated books. He was on a quest. He was looking for a legendary figure believed to live in the Al-Fayoum oasis, the caravan's destination. That figure was the alchemist. The Englishman believed the alchemist was a master who had lived for hundreds of years, who knew the secret of the philosopher's stone, and was capable of turning any ordinary metal into pure gold. He had spent his entire inheritance and years of his life trying to decode the secret ciphers in ancient alchemical texts. For him, understanding came from reading. Santiago, on the other hand, began to understand the world in a different way. He tried reading the Englishman's books, but he felt he learned more from observing how the caravan moved, how the desert wind reshaped the sand dunes, and how the camels found their way. He was learning the language of omens, the language of the world itself. Here, two types of knowledge collided. Knowledge from books versus knowledge from the world. The Englishman looked for answers in complex symbols on paper, while Santiago found answers in the silence of the desert. Through his observations, Santiago began to sense a concept even deeper than the personal legend. He began to feel an invisible thread connecting everything. The blowing wind, the sand he stepped on, the sun above his head, and even his own destiny. Everything was part of a single whole unity. He began to understand what the alchemist called the soul of the world. The soul of the world is the essence of life flowing through all things, a universal intelligence that makes the universe work in harmony. When you clear your heart of fear and selfish desires, you can communicate with this soul. You can understand the wordless language. Slowly but surely, Santiago realized that true alchemy wasn't about turning lead into gold. It was a process of self-refinement. It was about cleaning the soul of all impurities like fear, envy, and despair, until the soul becomes pure like gold and able to reflect the soul of the world perfectly. The journey across the desert became a journey into himself. He set out as a shepherd boy looking for treasure, but now he was transforming into a philosopher beginning to understand the secrets of the universe. The treasure he sought was no longer just a chest of gold under the pyramids. That treasure was understanding itself. And he didn't know that at the oasis waiting ahead, this understanding would be tested by the two greatest forces, love and death. After weeks of crossing the monotonous sea of sand, a miracle appeared on the horizon. Not a mirage, but a lush green line. Hundreds of thousands of date palms, huts, and life. They had arrived at the Al-Fayoum oasis, a protected paradise in the heart of the desert. An oasis is neutral ground, a sanctuary where the laws of war don't apply. Here, the caravan could rest safely. However, in this paradise, Santiago found a danger greater than any threat of war. The danger of stopping. That danger came in the form of a girl at the edge of a well. The Englishman with him immediately went to look for the alchemist. Santiago, who was also thirsty, walked toward the well. That's where he saw her, a girl dressed in black with a jug on her shoulder, but her face was uncovered. When their eyes met, time stopped. In that one brief moment, Santiago felt the vibration of the soul of the world with a power he had never felt before. He suddenly understood a language that transcends all languages in the world. A language understood by everyone in their heart, love. He realized that all his travels, all his sheep, all his crystals, and all the silence of the desert had led him to this point, to this moment, to this girl. Her name was Fatima. For the first time since leaving Andalusia, the wanderer found a reason to stop his journey. The pyramids and his treasure felt unimportant compared to Fatima's smile. The oasis was no longer just a stopover. It felt like home. This was the greatest and sweetest test of the heart. Would he trade his personal legend for the comfort of love? As this dilemma tore his heart apart, the universe gave him a terrifying omen. One afternoon, while gazing at the desert sky, he saw two hawks flying high. Suddenly, one of the hawks dove and attacked the other. In an instant, a clear and brutal vision flooded his mind, an image of armed troops invading the peaceful oasis. He trembled. The vision felt so real. He remembered the teachings of the old king and the camel driver to always read the omens. With courage gained from the desert, he did the unthinkable. He went to the oasis tribal chieftains and told them his vision of the coming bloodshed. This was a huge gamble. In the oasis, bringing bad news, especially about war, could result in a death sentence. The chieftains listened skeptically, but they were also desert people who believed in omens. They decided to prepare themselves, but with one condition. If there was no battle tomorrow, Santiago's life would be the price. That night, Santiago told Fatima about his fear, and it was here that Fatima taught him the purest and most liberating lesson on love. She was not an obstacle to his destiny, but a part of it. As a woman of the desert, she knew how to wait. She knew that a man must go chase his destiny. Go, Fatima said, her voice calm yet powerful. Pursue your personal legend. If I am truly part of your destiny, then one day you will surely come back to me. Because true love never holds someone back from their destiny. Maktub, it is written. Those words set Santiago free. He understood now. The fourth lesson of the alchemist was etched into his soul. True love never prevents someone from pursuing their destiny. Selfish love will hold you back, but pure love gives you the strength to go and become the best version of yourself, because it believes you will return. The next day, Santiago's vision became reality. The oasis was attacked, but because of his warning, the oasis warriors were ready and successfully defended their home. Santiago didn't just survive, he was hailed as a hero. His brave action, born from his ability to read the language of the world, caught someone's attention. A mysterious rider with a hawk on his shoulder approached him at dusk. His gaze was sharp, as if he could see straight into Santiago's soul. The wanderer had arrived. The alchemist had found him. Here he was, the alchemist. Not a frail figure hunched over a cauldron of potions, but a majestic and silent rider whose gaze seemed to contain the wisdom of the desert itself. He didn't give Santiago easy answers. Instead, he pushed Santiago to find those answers within himself. Your treasure is at the pyramids, said the alchemist, and I will guide you there. So began the final stage of Santiago's journey. No longer with the crowded caravan, but just the two of them with the master, riding across the most dangerous parts of the desert where tribal wars were raging. Here, the peak lessons were given, not through lectures but through experience. The alchemist taught him to listen to his heart. Wherever your heart is, he whispered, there you will find your treasure. Santiago learned that his heart was often treacherous. His heart was afraid. His heart wanted to go back to the safety of the oasis with Fatima. His heart didn't want to suffer. And the alchemist gave him the antidote to the greatest poison, fear. He said, tell your heart that the fear of suffering is far worse than the suffering itself, and no heart has ever suffered when it is in pursuit of its dreams. This was the mantra that freed Santiago from his last doubts, but the desert always holds a test. They were captured by a troop of soldiers from one of the warring tribes. All of the alchemist's gold was confiscated, and their lives were at the edge of a sword. In that desperate situation, the alchemist did something extraordinary. He handed all his gold to the commander and said, this boy is an alchemist. He can turn himself into the wind and destroy this camp if he wants to. The commander laughed in disbelief, but he was curious. He gave them an ultimatum. In 3 days, the boy had to prove the master's words. If he could turn himself into the wind, their lives would be spared. If not, they would die. Santiago was overwhelmed with terror. I don't know how to turn myself into the wind, he shouted to the alchemist when they were alone. The alchemist simply replied calmly, if you are a true alchemist, you can. If you are just a shepherd, then you will die. But remember, the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself. The master had pushed his student to the edge of the cliff, forcing him to fly. For 2 days, Santiago meditated in silence. On the 3rd day, he climbed to the top of a cliff, watched by the soldiers and the commander. This is where the peak of his transformation happened. This wasn't magic, this was a dialogue with the universe. First, Santiago spoke to the desert. He spoke of his love for Fatima, and how the desert had led him. The desert replied that it couldn't help. Then Santiago asked the wind for help. He told the wind about the soul of the world, about how the wind carries the sound of love and the sense from all corners of the earth. The wind became curious, but it didn't know how to turn a human into the wind. The wind suggested he talk to the sun. Santiago gazed at the mighty sun. He spoke to the sun about how love is capable of changing everything. The sun, the wisest entity, acknowledged the power of love, but even it didn't know how to do it. The sun suggested he speak to the source of everything, the hand that wrote all this. And finally, Santiago prayed, not with words, but with the total silence of his heart. For the first time, he realized that the soul of the world and the soul of God are one. He realized that his own soul was a spark of that soul of God. He was a part of everything, and everything was a part of him. In that peak of understanding, he no longer needed to ask. He only needed to be. A fierce desert wind, known as the Simum, began to blow. A violent sandstorm enveloped the camp, ripping tents from the ground. The soldiers clung tight in fear. When the storm subsided, they looked toward the cliff. Santiago was no longer there. He was now on the other side of the camp. He didn't fly. He didn't vanish. He simply merged with the soul of the world and manifested himself elsewhere. He had performed the grandest alchemy, not turning lead into gold but turning fear into understanding, proving that man's greatest power lies within himself, in his connection with the Creator. The soldiers trembled in fear and awe. The commander and the alchemist bowed their heads. The student had surpassed the master. After parting ways with the alchemist, Santiago continued his journey alone, with a heart that now understood the language of the world. Finally, it arrived. Looming majestically under the moonlight stood the Egyptian pyramids. He fell to his knees and tears washed over his face, tears of gratitude. He had made it. He had followed his destiny to the end of the world. At the spot where his tears fell, he saw a scarab beetle, which was a symbol of God in ancient Egypt. He took it as an omen. With trembling hands full of hope, he began to dig in the sand at the base of the pyramid, right where he saw the beetle. He dug all night but found nothing but sand and stone. Suddenly, several shadows approached. They were a group of refugees from the tribal wars he had just passed. They saw Santiago digging, and thought he was hiding gold. They dragged him from the hole, robbing him of the small bit of gold the alchemist had given him. They forced him to keep digging, but they still found nothing. Angry at not finding any treasure, They beat Santiago cruelly, leaving him slumped and bleeding in the very sand of his dreams. On the brink of death, Santiago groaned, "I was digging for treasure." Before leaving, the leader of the robbers approached the dying Santiago and laughed out loud. "You're not going to die," he said mockingly, "but you're going to learn that people shouldn't be that stupid." 2 years ago, right in this spot, I also had a dream. Over and over again my dream took me to a ruined old church in Spain where shepherds and their sheep used to sleep. My dream told me that if I dug at the roots of the sycamore tree growing inside that church, I would find a chest of treasure. But I'm not that stupid. I wouldn't cross the entire desert just because of a dream. And then he left. Santiago lay still, blood flowing from his wounds. But inside him, something extraordinary happened. His pain vanished. He slowly stood up, looked at the pyramids one last time, and he laughed, a loud laugh full of relief, the laugh of a man who finally understood everything. The universe had conspired. The treasure had never been in Egypt. The treasure had always been where he started his journey. So what was all this for? Why the journey across continents, the robbery, working at the crystal shop, crossing the desert, finding love, and even learning to become the wind? The answer was so clear now. The journey wasn't the way to reach the treasure. The journey was the treasure. He had to go to Tangier to learn to rise from failure. He had to work at the crystal shop to understand the value of patience. He had to cross the desert to learn the language of the world. He had to meet the alchemist to find the power within himself. And most importantly, he had to hear the story from the robber at the foot of the pyramid to finally know where his gold was. All of it was maktub. It was written as the path he had to travel to become a person worthy of receiving that treasure. With a heart now full of the gold of wisdom, Santiago returned. He crossed the ocean, back to Andalusia, back to that ruined old church. He walked under the sycamore tree that once witnessed his dream. He dug, and there, beneath the roots of the tree, he found an old chest full of Spanish gold coins, precious stones, and priceless jewelry. His personal legend was fulfilled. He was rich beyond his dreams, but his greatest wealth wasn't the gold in that chest. His true wealth was Fatima waiting for him, and the deep understanding etched into his soul. Here, the last and most grand lesson of the alchemist is revealed. Sometimes you have to travel around the world just to realize that the treasure you desire most has been buried in your own backyard. But you would never have found it if you didn't have the courage to start the journey. Santiago looked at the horizon, feeling the east wind now carrying the scent of Fatima's perfume. He smiled. His journey wasn't over. A new journey, the journey to return to love, was about to begin.